everyone, it's Mark again, and we are back to talk about the 53 Chevy project again. This is going to be video number 2 of a million about getting that car back on the road. So this one here is going to cover the next 20 years after the first video, from 98 to today, 2018. I'm going to go over like the moving of it, the teardown, frame repair, getting the new axle from a 60 Chevy, getting that ready to go, had to be narrowed and things. Putting in a 4-link, working on the front suspension. I think that's about it. I'll probably have a separate video when it gets to the engine and transmission and stuff, because I've barely gotten started on that, so there wouldn't be much to show. So that's about it. I'm going to switch over to a slideshow mode and just kind of narrate it. So follow me to the slideshow. Thanks. Okay, here we are moving the car in September of 2012. This was in my friend's garage, and he wanted his garage back. So we towed it out to my dad's workshop, which is about 5 minutes from my house. You can see the sweet wooden bumper there. And I promptly started tearing it down. So this is just going to be a bunch of pictures I took before the teardown, just so I could kind of remember how everything goes back together. I deleted a bunch of these from this slideshow so it wouldn't drag on for too long, but there's quite a few. So maybe this is boring to you, but maybe you're also working on a 53, 54, and this might help. You can see the dashboard's already starting to get stripped down. I think I did that while it was being stored in my garage at my old house. And a lot of these are just to keep the wiring straight, so I know which hole they pop through, which thing they connect to. And you might notice too that all the wires under the hood are plastic, but the wires in the steering column and the body are cloth. And I'm pretty sure that's because this was just a transitional model, because that was about the year that they switched from cloth to plastic wiring. So I guess it makes sense that if they would use up all the cloth before switching to the plastic, and maybe they just ran out of body harnesses before engine harnesses, or vice versa. So when I redo it, I'm going to switch to all cloth just for the look. Yeah, there's really not a lot to say about most of these. It's just going to be, oh, there's under the dashboard. You ever realize how much space is under there? But yeah, a lot of these are just going to be general pictures of nothing interesting, just stuff I can refer back to remember where things go. Oh, and there you can see the rust that I get to address. And there's the body bolts. So you can tell why I didn't feel too bad about doing a custom. I was going to do the car, put it all back to completely original, and one of the things that drove me away from it was just how absolutely shot everything was. Like, it was never gonna look right after all the repairs and everything anyway, so decided I'm only gonna do this once. I might as well do it the way I want it. Oh, there you can see the angle iron that we welded in. It was a chunk from a garage door kit that we tried to fix the frame with right there, back when I was still a teenager. Now here we have it moved inside the shop. Still basically in the same place today. You can see how ruined that frame was. I was thinking of trying to just get a less rusty frame for it, but being that this is a hardtop model, the frame is a little bit different from all the sedan ones, and it just makes it a lot harder to find one. And if I did find one in Iowa, it would probably be just as bad. There's the straight six coming out. That will get rebuilt and will be put back in, except with a 200 4R transmission. 2 speeds just wasn't cutting it for me. The thing was screaming on the highway. And that transmission would have had to be rebuilt anyway because reverse gear was out of it at least. So if I'm going to spend money to rebuild a transmission, I might as well get 2 more speeds out of the deal. And here we go, where I started a bunch of months of just cutting, grinding, welding, repeat. Now some of you might see those plug weld holes and think they were too small. You're right. Eventually I ended up flipping the frame upside down. There's some pictures later in this, so I can do some repairs to the underside, and when I did that I cut larger holes and plug welded it from the bottom because those little plug welds were not holding up. Oh, and you can see the step notches there. If you're not into lowriders, you will hate this car. There's one of the body mounts. I've gotten a lot better at welding since I started this project. There I made a couple body mounts to replace some other ones. You can see them welded on there. There's that garage door frame again. Yeah, I don't think anybody's would be as crazy as me with saving this frame. I think most people would just see it as a loss and either find a replacement or order up one of those nice $10,000 replacement ones with the independent front suspension and all that, but this whole thing's on a budget. Oh, and that's the rear member that goes across the back. Alright, here's the axle from a '60 Chevy that I'm modifying to fit on this. Why did I select that axle? It was offered to me and it was a good deal. Could have saved a little bit of time and trouble by buying one that was a few inches narrower maybe, but I also just like the idea of sticking with 1950s GM. Just kind of has the right look. So here I am starting to get the 4-link in. I've never done a 4-link before. I did a ton of research on it, and everybody's got an opinion on how to do it right. Here I am dropping it on a 4-jack. So yeah, I tried to just read everything I could and try to do my best to separate the experts from the know-it-alls. The front suspension had to be pretty heavily modified for the front hydraulics. The way people normally do it is they just, right there, you see the larger holes that I cut, they just cut those holes, put on a donut, slide it in there, and call it good. But the clearance between the top of the shock towers and the inner fender wells is very, very tight. I mean, you can barely get in there. So I designed it so that the cylinders would be flush with the top, and when you attach the fittings, it would just barely clear, because I didn't want to hack up the inner fender wells, and I didn't want to hack up the fresh air tubes. And there are the springs I ordered. Those are industrial die springs. Those are not off-the-shelf springs or lowrider springs, because they had to be a weird size to fit. And since I slid the cylinders down as far as I could and got as small a spring as I could, I had to make a pretty deep spring pocket in the lower control arms so that I could still have the spring travel and not hack up the inner fender wells. Here's the steering arms and tie rods and everything before. The tie rods weren't very old, so I ended up just reusing those. However, the springs and grease joints and everything all needed to be replaced. Here I am mocking up the front suspension. I'll get a pretty good shot here in a second of the cylinder arrangement. Yeah, there you can see how it's just flush. I've got a set screw to hold it in place so it's not twisting around, because there's going to be a right angle fitting on there and I don't want it to spin around. And there you can see where the cylinders rest. Oh, here's the rebuilt spindles and steering linkages and things. All new grade 8 bolts. And I made my own cups because a chunk of steel was cheaper than the wrong size cups that I was going to have to turn down, so I just decided to make them. You can see my chatter from my lathe setup, which is a little bit wimpy. There's the front going back together. And there it is set back on the frame. For these shots I have the springs removed because I wanted to see all the way down if the tie rods hit, and they do. So I'm going to have to order some of those drop steering arms so I can clear the underside of the frame. And here I flipped the frame upside down to do some of the repairs from the bottom side. It's all pretty ugly right now. My dad's shop, where that's at, does not have climate control, so in the summer it's kind of too hot to be wrapped up in welding gear, and in the winter it's too cold to do anything. So here's the rear end rebuild process. There's the date stamp, I assume, was 1958. It came out of a 1960 Chevy wagon. And it's, I believe, 308 gears, I think, which seems pretty high, but when factored in with the wheels and the transmission and everything, I've done all the calculations, and it's going to work out just perfect because I'm not trying to do burnouts. I'd rather have a nice low engine RPM on the highway. So I'm narrowing the axles 1.5 inches per side so I can fit reverse wires in there. And just to show that stuff is happening with the rear end, as you can see, it's pretty much set up, except I got some pits when you get up close. And all I have is a flux core wire feed welder, which does a really bad job of filling in voids, so I'm just kind of putting that on hold until I get a TIG welder. And then beyond that, the next thing is going to be to shorten the axles, the actual axle shafts, and that still needs a lot of figuring. So just so you know, the axle housing is here and it's almost done, so something is getting done.